My 15-year-old daughter uses a wheelchair. She was resting quietly in her bedroom on the second floor. She had a hard day at therapy and just wanted to relax. She likes to look out the window from her bed and watch the clouds or listen to the trees. It was a calm evening. Then Karen from the HOA walked into our house without asking. She ran up the stairs and shouted, "You can't stay in bedrooms like this. It looks lazy and breaks the rules." My daughter said softly, "I'm just resting. I'm not hurting anyone." Karen got very angry. She walked right into the room and sprayed bad gas from a can. My daughter started coughing and could not breathe. Her scared eyes looked around for help as she held her throat. Karen stood in the door and said with a mean smile, "Now the house smells clean and follows the rules." She looked happy with herself. She did not know the strong man running up the stairs behind her was my daughter's father, the deputy commissioner, back from a big case. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. The evening sunlight streamed gently through the window, casting a warm golden glow across Mia's bedroom. The curtains fluttered softly in the breeze, and the faint scent of lilacs drifted in from the garden below. She rested against the soft pillows propped behind her back, her wheelchair parked neatly beside the bed. Today had been long. Therapy had drained every ounce of energy from her, leaving her muscles sore and her mind exhausted. For a moment, she allowed herself the luxury of stillness. The clouds outside floated lazily across the sky, shifting and stretching in shades of pink, purple, and gold. She loved to watch them, letting her imagination trace their forms into dragons, castles, and faraway lands. The sound of the trees swaying in the evening wind, the distant hum of the neighborhood, the quiet whisper of the sky. It was her sanctuary, a place untouched by rules and expectations. Mia closed her eyes and let out a slow, contented breath. She didn't have to do anything for anyone. She didn't have to speak, move, or fight. She could just exist. Then came the noise. At first, it was subtle, a muffled thud from the hall. She thought perhaps it was one of the neighbor's children playing outside or her cat knocking something off the shelf downstairs. But then the sound grew closer, heavier, deliberate, and finally the door to her bedroom slammed open with such force that the windows rattled. "You can't stay in bedrooms like this. It looks lazy and breaks the rules." Mia's heart jumped into her throat. Her chest tightened, her lungs constricting, and her fingers curled instinctively around the edge of her blanket. Her eyes widened as she saw the figure standing in the doorway. Karen, the HOA enforcer. The woman everyone in the neighborhood whispered about. The woman who seemed to take pleasure in controlling everything. Everyone! Mia tried to speak, but her throat felt tight. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she managed, I'm just resting. I'm not hurting anyone." Karen's lips twisted into a cruel smile. Her eyes gleamed with a strange satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for this moment for weeks. Without hesitation, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small metallic canister. Mia didn't know what it was at first. Then she smelled it, sharp, acrid, burning her nose, stinging her eyes. Before she could react, Karen pressed the nozzle. A cloud of thick, choking gas sprayed into the room. Mia coughed violently, gagging as her throat burned. Her chest tightened as her lungs fought for air. Tears sprang to her eyes, blurring the once beautiful room into a haze of gold and shadow. She clutched at her throat, the world tilting around her. The wheelchair sat right beside her, her only means of escape, but panic had frozen her. She couldn't move fast enough. Her mind raced, searching for something, anything to hold on to. She wanted to scream, to call for help, to push Karen out of the room, but her voice refused to form. Every breath felt like fire. "Now the house smells clean and follows the rules." Karen sneered, her voice cold and triumphant. She took a slow step into the room, her boots clicking on the hardwood floor, leaving an echo that seemed louder than anything else. Mia's eyes darted frantically, scanning the room. The window! Maybe she could reach it, if only she could move, but the burning in her chest was too intense. She shook her head, coughing uncontrollably, her body trembling with fear. Then came the sound that saved her, heavy, purposeful, undeniable. Boots thudded up the stairs, fast, determined, full of rage. Karen froze, turning just slightly, her confidence faltering. She hadn't expected anyone else to be home. She didn't know the figure, charging up the staircase behind her. Mia's vision sharpened just enough to see him. A tall man, strong, authoritative, his uniform still crisp despite the long hours he had spent away. Her father, he was a deputy commissioner back from a high-profile case. She had seen him handle criminals, threats, and danger before, but now he was here, right here, just for her. And the fury in his eyes was something even Karen with all her arrogance, couldn't ignore. Karen's smile faltered, then disappeared. The canister slipped slightly in her hand, and she took an instinctive step back. Mia could barely believe it. Her father, who had always promised to protect her, was here. She felt a small spark of hope ignite inside her chest, fighting against the fear that had gripped her moments before. Her father's voice boomed across the room, deep and commanding. "Step away from my daughter, now." Karen hesitated. The smirk that had terrorized Mia moments ago was gone, replaced by the faintest flicker of panic. She had underestimated him. She had underestimated all of them. Mia coughed again, weaker this time, her hand trembling as she reached for the wheelchair. Her father lunged forward, snatching the canister from Karen's grasp with one swift motion. Karen tried to protest, to push back, but his grip was iron strong. "You're done, Karen," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "You will pay for this. You understand?" Karen's eyes widened, and for the first time, Mia saw fear reflected in them. The kind of fear that comes when someone realizes they've gone too far, when the rules they cling to no longer protect them, when authority, not bureaucracy, is standing in the doorway. Mia's father turned to her, checking her over quickly, assessing the damage the gas had done, his face a mix of worry and relief. "Are you okay, Mia? I think so," she whispered, still coughing, still shaking. But relief coursed through her veins stronger than the fear that had gripped her before. She was safe. He was here. Karen wouldn't get away with this. As her father escorted her away from the doorway, Karen's scream of anger echoed down the hall, sharp and bitter. But it was drowned out by the sound of someone else's resolve. The resolve of a father who would not allow anyone to harm his child. For the first time in what felt like forever, Mia allowed herself to breathe, truly breathe, and the golden evening light seemed softer, warmer, as though the world had tilted back into balance. But she knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. Karen would come back. And the war for her peace, her safety, and her home was far from over. The thudding of boots on the stairs was a lifeline, cutting through the haze of fear and choking gas. Mia tried to focus, to pull herself upright in the wheelchair, but her muscles were heavy and stiff from exhaustion. Her father's voice thundered through the house, each word sharp, precise, and possibly commanding. "Step away from her, Karen, now." The words hit like a hammer. Karen froze mid-step, the canister still in her hand, though now it wobbled slightly as doubt crept into eyes. She had always thrived on fear, on control, but in that instant she realized she was not in control anymore. You don't understand," Karen stammered, trying to sound authoritative, but her voice had lost its venom. "I understand perfectly," Mia's father said, his tone cutting through the room like a blade. "You are violating the law and my home. Step back or I will make sure you're arrested." The calm precision in his words shocked Karen. She had faced angry neighbors before, indignant parents, people who yelled and protested. But this was different. This was authority, raw and unyielding. She opened her mouth to argue, but the flash of a phone in his hand, ready to call the authorities, made her hesitate. Mia, still coughing, tried to speak. Her voice came out hoarse and shaky, but determined. "Dad, please, she sprayed me. She tried to hurt me." That was all her father needed. He stepped closer, positioning himself between Mia and Karen. His hands, steady and strong, gripped the canister. Karen tried to resist, but she underestimated his strength. Within moments, the device was ripped from her grasp and the threat neutralized. "You will not lay a finger on her again," he said, his jaw tight with anger. "Do you hear me?" Karen's face flushed red, a mixture of humiliation and rage. Her hands trembled as she realized she had been cornered, caught entirely unprepared. She opened her mouth to shout something defiant, but it came out as a strangled hiss. You can't do this. I'm enforcing the rules. Mia's father didn't flinch. He held the phone tightly, one hand, calling the local authorities. "Yes, this is Deputy Commissioner Hart. There's an intruder at my residence. She's assaulted my daughter with a chemical irritant. I need immediate backup." Karen's eyes darted wildly around the room, calculating her next move. Her confidence, absolute, had crumbled. Every ounce of her arrogance had evaporated in the presence of someone who truly wielded power. She shifted, tried to push past Mia's father, but he stepped firmly in her path, blocking her escape. Mia's coughing subsided slightly, though she was still shaky. She stared at Karen, finally finding the courage to meet her gaze. You can't just come into my house and do that. You don't own me. You don't own anyone." The words hit Karen like stones. Her mouth opened again, but she was silent. She had never been challenged like this, and the strength in Mia's voice, fierce, unwavering despite the fear, was something she hadn't anticipated. "Good girl." her father murmured, more to himself than to Mia. Stand strong. Don't let her see weakness. Karen's hands flew to her face, her eyes wide with panic. I, I, I was just doing my job. You don't understand the rules. The rules don't give you the right to harm anyone, her father replied, his voice low and controlled, yet radiating authority. You've crossed a line, Karen, and now the law will handle the rest. By now the house was quiet except for Mia's shallow breathing and the distant sound of sirens approaching. Karen's face twisted in desperation. She realized her options were gone. There was no backing down, no escape, no allies. Every threat she had used before had failed her, and the looming presence of Mia's father, a man who didn't just follow the law but enforced it with unwavering strength, left her trapped. Mia's father guided her carefully into her wheelchair, making sure she was steady and unharmed. Karen's eyes followed every movement, her pride and authority crumbling. Stay right there, he said to Karen, pointing firmly. I will not tolerate another step toward my daughter. Help is on the way. You're going to explain yourself to the authorities. Every action, every word, everything. Karen sank slowly to the floor, a mixture of fear and disbelief etched across her face. The bravado that had allowed her to bully the neighborhood, to enforce her rigid rules with cruelty, had evaporated. She was powerless now, completely and utterly powerless. Mia, still coughing but managing small breaths, looked up at her father. Relief washed over her in waves. Dad, you saved me, she whispered, her voice trembling. He crouched beside her wheelchair, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. I promised I would protect you, he said softly. And I always will. No one, not even her, gets to hurt you. As the sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of law enforcement, Mia allowed herself to relax slightly, knowing the immediate danger had passed. Karen's reign of terror had ended, for now, but the memory of her cruelty lingered, a shadow over the house. Her father, still alert and tense, kept his eyes on Karen until the authorities arrived. Every movement, every word from the intruder would be documented. Justice, he knew, had to be thorough. For Mia, the realization slowly sank in. She was safe, truly safe. And though the ordeal had terrified her, it had also revealed a strength she hadn't fully recognized, a strength her father had helped ignite. She wasn't helpless. She could fight back, and with her family by her side, she could face anything. Karen's shrill protests faded as the authorities entered the house, taking control of the situation. Her days of intimidation were over, and Mia's home was finally hers again, a sanctuary once more, where the only rules that mattered were love, safety, and peace. The sirens had barely faded when paramedics arrived at the Hart residence, their uniforms crisp, their movements efficient and calm. Mia sat in her wheelchair in the middle of the living room, still trembling from the shock, her throat sore from coughing, and her eyes red from the gas. Her father hovered beside her, his jaw tight, his hands occasionally clenching into fists before he forced them to relax. He had handled criminals before, high-profile cases with dangerous stakes, but seeing his own daughter targeted in her home, his sanctuary, stirred a different kind of rage. Miss Hart, one paramedic asked gently, kneeling beside Mia. Can you tell me your name and what happened? Mia's lips quivered as she whispered, Mia, she sprayed me with gas. The words were halting, but each one carried the weight of fear, shock, and disbelief. Her father's hand rested firmly on her shoulder, grounding her. That's right, he said, his voice steady. She is my daughter. I want a full check, lungs, eyes, throat, everything. The paramedics worked quickly, checking Mia's oxygen, listening to her lungs, examining her eyes for irritation. She flinched each time the stethoscope pressed against her chest, but she didn't cry. She had been scared beyond measure moments before, but now, as she realized she was safe, she felt a strange mix of relief and lingering adrenaline. Her breathing is shallow, likely from the irritant, one paramedic said to her father. A little rest, fluids and observation overnight, and she should be fine. No lasting physical damage appears. Her father nodded, but his eyes remained hard, burning with unspent anger. Thank you. I appreciate your quick response. Once Mia was settled, wrapped in a blanket with a cool cloth against her flushed cheeks, the real work began. Her father picked up the phone again, calling his office and arranging for a legal investigation into Karen's actions. Karen's intrusion was not only a blatant violation of HOA rules and neighborhood etiquette, it was assault. And with Mia's injuries, however minor, the charges could be severe. News of the incident spread through DH neighborhood like wildfire. At first, neighbors whispered behind their hands, some in disbelief, others in cautious sympathy. Then came the calls, the messages, the texts. everyone asking if Mia was okay, if Karen had been stopped, if the story was true. It didn't take long for the whispers to reach the HOA board. Suddenly, Karen's carefully curated image, the enforcer of rules, the meticulous authority in the neighborhood, began to crumble. Emails leaked, neighbors came forward with previous complaints, and subtle rumors of her overreach and intimidation now had solid evidence attached to the assault on Mia. Inside the Hart household, the atmosphere was tense. Mia sat on the couch, her blanket pulled around her shoulders, listening to her father on speakerphone, detailing every action Karen had taken, recording timestamps, eyewitness accounts, and the statements from the paramedics. He spoke in calm, precise tones, yet every so often, his voice betrayed the underlying anger simmering beneath the surface. "I can handle the investigation professionally," he said, closing his eyes for a brief moment. But seeing Mia gasping, "It's different. This is personal." Mia's mother, who had been quietly observing from the hallway, reached out and took her daughter's hand. "Dad," she said softly, "you're going to make sure she pays for what she did. But Mia needs you calm right now. She needs safety, not fury." Her father nodded slowly, letting a deep breath out. "You're right, always calm first. Justice second. But trust me." His gaze shifted toward the front door, where Karen had been temporarily held until authorities arrived. "Justice will come." As the evening progressed, officers arrived to take Karen's statement. Mia watched from the living room, her father standing like a shield between her and the chaos. Karen's face was pale, her confident, controlling demeanor replaced by desperation and fear. The neighbors peered from their windows, some filming, some whispering, all witnessing the unraveling of someone who had once seemed untouchable. Even though Mia was safe physically, her mind replayed the attack over and over. She kept thinking about the smell of the gas, the burning in her throat, the helplessness of being trapped in her bedroom. But the worst part, the part that made her stomach knot with unease, was that this had happened in her own home. The place where she should have been safest had been violated. Her father knelt beside her again, placing a hand gently on her knee. "Mia, I know it feels scary right now," he said, his voice firm but soft. "But you are stronger than you know. You survived. You stayed calm. And we stopped her before she could hurt you more." Tears pricked Mia's eyes. She nodded, finally allowing herself to let some of the tension go. I didn't think anyone would come," she admitted, voice shaking. "I am always here," he said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze, "and we will make sure this never happens again. Karen underestimated you, underestimated all of us." The legal investigation intensified over the next few days. Evidence was collected meticulously, the canister used, witness statements, and Karen's own words caught on camera and audio recordings from neighbors' phones. The HOA board was forced to intervene, and emails exposing her aggressive, often illegal behavior circulated widely. Karen, once feared and respected in the neighborhood, now faced scrutiny from all sides. Through it all, Mia began to regain her strength, emotionally if not entirely physically. She realized her voice mattered, her words could be heard, and her presence could not be ignored. Sitting by the window one evening, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky, she let herself breathe deeply for the first time. In what felt like days, her father watched her from the doorway, silent but vigilant. He had promised protection, and he would keep that promise. Karen's actions had shaken them, but they had not broken them. And as the first hints of justice began to take shape, Mia felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't known before. No one, not even Karen, could take that from her. The morning after the assault, the neighborhood seemed quieter than usual, but the air was thick with tension. Word had spread fast. Karen's reputation was no longer untouchable, but she refused to go down quietly. As neighbors whispered behind closed doors and peered through blinds, Karen began her counterattack, determined to paint herself as the victim. By mid-morning, flyers appeared on neighbors' doors. Bold letters screamed accusations, disturbance complaints ignored, unfair treatment by the Harts. Karen's words twisted the truth, claiming Mia and her parents were being unreasonable, bullying her, and threatening the peace and order of the community. It was a desperate attempt to regain control, but those who had witnessed her behavior firsthand were skeptical. Mia's father read the flyers carefully, his jaw tight. He placed them on the kitchen counter, his eyes narrowing. "She's trying to manipulate the neighbors," he said quietly. "She's always done this, turning the narrative to make herself look righteous. But this time it won't work. Not with proof." Proof. That word carried weight. For weeks prior, Karen had been sending overly aggressive emails, inspecting properties without permission, and issuing fines for trivial sometimes non-existent violations. Some neighbors had quietly complained before but feared retaliation. Now, with Mia's attack as evidence, her harassment could no longer be ignored. Mia, still recovering from the gas exposure, sat in her wheelchair by the window. She had watched her father work tirelessly, collecting emails, videos, and statements from neighbors who had experienced Karen's cruelty firsthand. At first, she had felt powerless, trapped in her room while Karen roamed freely through the neighborhood, pretending to be the enforcer of justice. But now, as she watched the pile of evidence grow, something stirred inside her, a spark of courage she hadn't recognized before. "I want to help," Mia said softly one evening, her eyes meeting her father's. He paused, surprised by the determination in her voice. I don't want her to think she can scare me or anyone else, ever again." Her father smiled faintly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll do it together, but carefully. We need witnesses, records, and a plan. Karen will fight back, and she's cunning. But you're brave." That night they began contacting neighbors. Some were hesitant at first, still afraid of Karen's wrath. But the flood of proof, the canister incident, videos of her yelling and threatening, and emails filled with intimidation, gave them courage. One by one, neighbors came forward, recounting previous incidents, fines for untended flowers, verbal harassment during community meetings, and even attempts to block the Hart family from using shared spaces. Mia listened as neighbors spoke, feeling a strange mixture of anger and relief. She realized she was not alone. Karen's power had always depended on fear, but the truth, supported by witnesses, was stronger than fear. Meanwhile, Karen escalated her attempts to control the narrative. She visited neighbors' homes, knocking aggressively and claiming she was under attack by the Hart family. Some were swayed by her dramatic gestures, but most had already seen the evidence. Even the neighbors who had once feared her began to question her motives. Whispers of disbelief turned into conversations about accountability and consequences. Mia's confidence grew as she witnessed this shift. One afternoon, she wheeled herself to the front porch, her father beside her, and called out to Mrs. Patel, an elderly neighbor who had seen the attack from her window. "Mrs. Patel," Mia said, her voice clear, "did you see what happened yesterday? Did Karen spray me with gas?" Mrs. Patel's eyes softened as she nodded. "I saw everything, Mia, and I'm so proud of you for speaking up." That simple acknowledgement sent a wave of empowerment through Mia. She realized that while Karen had tried to intimidate her, she couldn't erase the truth. Her voice mattered, her story mattered, and her courage could protect others too. By the end of the week, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting. Karen arrived as usual, poised and ready to lecture the community about order and rules. But the room had shifted. Mia's father presented the evidence meticulously: videos, emails, eyewitness accounts, and neighbors backed the claims. The murmur of disbelief in the room grew louder as Karen faltered, her usual confidence crumbling. Mia watched from the back, gripping her father's hand. She didn't feel fear, she felt determination. She realized something vital: Karen's power existed only because people let her control the story. Now the story was hers and the neighborhood's to tell. Karen's voice wavered as she tried to argue, but the board interrupted, citing violations and previous incidents. The gravity of her actions was impossible to ignore. Karen's smirk, the same one that had once terrorized Mia in her own bedroom, was gone. All that remained was the realization that she had been exposed. After the meeting, Mia wheeled herself to the window again, letting the evening light wash over her. The clouds drifted lazily across the sky, just as they had before the attack. But this time, she didn't feel fear. She felt a sense of triumph, quiet but powerful. She had survived, she had spoken, and she had helped bring justice. Her father joined her, his hand on her shoulder, proud but still vigilant. "You've grown stronger, Mia. Stronger than you knew." Mia smiled faintly, a mix of exhaustion and pride. "I think I'm ready," she whispered. Ready for whatever comes next. And though Karen still lingered in the shadows of the neighborhood, plotting and scheming, Mia knew something had changed. She had discovered her voice, her strength, and the power of truth, and that power could never be taken from her. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt truly unafraid. The morning sun slanted through the windows of the Hart home, golden and serene, a stark contrast to the storm of the past week. Mia sat in her wheelchair near the window, her fingers tracing the edge of the blanket draped over her legs. She had spent countless hours watching the clouds drift, listening to the trees, finding calm in the gentle rhythm of nature. But today felt different. Today the calm was earned, not assumed. The HOA board meeting had been called to finalize the investigation into Karen's actions. Neighbors had spoken out, statements had been collected, and official records had documented her harassment. Every email, every threat, every abusive rule enforcement was now part of an undeniable paper trail. Karen had tried to defend herself, claiming she was upholding community standards, but the evidence told a different story. Mia's father, ever vigilant, had prepared meticulously for the meeting. He had reviewed the board's regulations, highlighted Karen's violations, and compiled the eyewitness testimonies from neighbors. Even the local authorities had provided reports on the chemical irritant attack in Mia's bedroom. It was a mountain of evidence, and Karen had no way to escape it, as the board mem. Ers filed into the meeting room. Mia's father spoke quietly with her. "Remember, Mia," he said, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, "truth matters. Facts matter. You don't need to be afraid. You have already shown strength beyond measure." Mia nodded, her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. She had replayed the events of the gas attack countless times, but the fear that had once gripped her chest now felt like a distant memory. Her courage had grown in the quiet hours spent planning, observing, and witnessing the support from her neighbors. The meeting began with a recitation of the HOA's responsibilities and rules. The chairperson explained that all actions must remain within the bounds of the law and the community bylaws. Karen's name was mentioned carefully, but the weight of her transgressions was clear to everyone in the room. When the floor was open for statements, neighbors recounted their experiences, times when Karen had unfairly fined residents, issued warnings without notice, or entered homes uninvited. Mia listened as her father presented the documented proof of Karen's assault on her. The video evidence, photographs, and eyewitness accounts left no room for dispute. Karen's face hardened as the board members reviewed the materials, but the confident smirk she had worn for years was gone. Now she was silent, realizing the consequences of her actions were unavoidable. One by one, neighbors who had once been hesitant spoke up, describing the intimidation and fear they had felt. The room was filled with a mixture of relief and outrage. Relief that someone had finally stood up to Karen, and outrage at the abuses she had committed under the guise of authority. Finally, the board addressed Karen directly. "Your actions have crossed both legal and community boundaries," the chairperson said firmly, spraying a chemical irritant in a resident's HOA. "Mia is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. You will face an official reprimand, your HOA privileges will be suspended, and law enforcement has been notified of potential criminal charges." Karen's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, but no words came. For the first time in years, she had no power, no defense, no room to manipulate. The room was unanimous in its support of the Hart family. The board's decision was final, and the consequences were unavoidable. Mia's father exhaled slowly, his posture relaxing for the first time in days. He looked at Mia, whose eyes met his with a quiet, steady courage. "You see," he said softly, "justice isn't about being strong alone. It's about standing up with truth and witnesses. You were brave, Mia. You still are." Mia's chest swelled with a mix of pride and relief. She had feared Karen, feared the chaos and intimidation, but now she understood something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was facing fear, knowing the truth, and standing tall despite it. As they returned home, the neighborhood seemed to breathe with them. Neighbors offered smiles, waves, and nods of respect. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others shared their relief that justice had been served. Mia realized that her voice had contributed to a larger change, that her experience had helped protect not just herself, but the entire community. That evening, she wheeled herself to the window once more, letting the warm breeze lift her hair and the fading sunlight paint the clouds in gentle hues. For the first time since the attack, she felt peace, a hard-earned, deep peace. She knew Karen might try to cause problems in other ways, but her family, the neighbors, and the truth were on her side. Her father joined her, standing silently, letting her enjoy the calm. "The rules can't hurt you when they are enforced properly," he said. "You've learned something valuable, Mia. You've learned that your courage matters, and your safety is never negotiable." Mia smiled faintly, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. "I think I'm ready for anything now," she whispered, and as night fell, bringing a quiet hush over the neighborhood, Mia finally felt the full weight of safety and empowerment. Karen's reign of intimidation was over. The HOA's rules were clear and just, and for the first time in weeks, Mia could simply breathe. She had survived fear, she had spoken truth, and she had discovered a strength within herself that no one could ever take away. The storm had passed, and though the clouds continued to move across the sky, Mia knew she would always have the courage to face them, whatever form they might take. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that wasn't suffocating or tense, but calm, soft, measured, a silence that felt like breathing after holding it in for too long. Mia sat in her wheelchair by the window, the familiar view of the garden and the distant streets of the neighborhood stretching out before her. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their leaves whispering soft secrets, and the clouds drifted lazily across the sky, pink and gold in the fading sunlight. It had been weeks since Karen's attack, weeks of recovery meetings and legal proceedings. Each day had brought small victories, a neighbor sharing a supportive word, an email confirming Karen's HOA suspension, or the official notification that her assault would be investigated by law enforcement. But none of these victories felt as powerful as this one, this quiet moment where Mia could simply exist without fear. Her father was nearby organizing some papers at the kitchen counter. Even in the quiet, his presence was comforting, a steady anchor. His eyes occasionally flicked toward her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, but there was also a vigilance that hadn't fully faded. Protective instinct doesn't disappear overnight, not after the events of that terrifying evening. Mia turned her gaze fully to the garden, watching as a bird landed on the railing of the porch, chirping softly. She allowed herself a slow breath, letting the tension she had carried for weeks melt just a little. The memory of the gas, the panic, the helplessness, they were still there, flickering like shadows, but they no longer had the power to control her. She had survived. She had spoken. She had faced fear and found strength she didn't know she possessed. Her mother joined her at the window, placing a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. "You've been through so much," she said softly. "I know it, though. Didn't just go away overnight, but look at you, Mia. Look at how strong you are." Mia leaned slightly into her mother's touch, a quiet smile forming. "I feel different," she admitted. "Not scared, not completely. I think I know I can handle things now, even if something bad happens." Her father looked up from the papers, nodding. "That's because you can, and you will. Fear doesn't disappear, Mia, but courage grows from knowing the truth, having people who care, and standing up when it matters most. You've done all of that." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room. The neighborhood outside seemed peaceful, almost ordinary, but Mia saw it differently now. Each home, each family, each tree held meaning, proof that her world was safe again, proof that justice could prevail. And she understood something new. Peace wasn't just the absence of threats, it was the presence of safety, support, and confidence. Days turned into weeks. The Hart family rebuilt their routines, small gestures making their home feel alive and protected once more. Mia returned to her hobbies, reading, sketching clouds, listening to the rustle of the trees. Therapy still remained a part of her life, but the dread that had once accompanied it had lessened. She felt empowered, her voice respected not only in her home but in the community. Neighbors stopped by more often, some sharing cookies, others just checking in. Many spoke to her father, expressing relief that Mia was safe and commending the family for standing up to Karen. Mia noticed the subtle shift where fear had once lingered, trust and mutual support now thrived. One evening, as Mia wheeled herself to her favorite spot by the window, she paused to watch the clouds stretch across the horizon. The sky was painted in streaks of orange, pink, and violet, and the world felt infinite, full of possibilities. She felt a lightness she hadn't known before, a sense that the house, the neighborhood, and her life were truly hers to navigate. Her father joined her, silent for a moment, watching the clouds with her. "You've come a long way, Mia," he said finally, his voice soft but steady. "This peace, it's yours. You earned it, and no one can take it from you." Mia nodded, a quiet determination settling into her chest. She realized that life would never be without challenges, that difficulties and threats might appear again. But now, she knew she had tools to face them, her voice, her courage, and the unwavering support of her family. Night fell, and the stars began to appear, tiny pinpricks of light scattered across the darkening sky. Mia leaned back in her wheelchair, letting the cool breeze brush her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly safe. The fear that had once dominated her world was gone, replaced by empowerment, resilience, and hope. Karen, suspended from HOA duties and facing legal consequences, could no longer dictate the rhythm of Mia's life. Her reign of intimidation had ended, and in its place a stronger sense of justice had taken root. Mia knew that the neighborhood, once divided by fear, was beginning to heal, and she had played a part in that transformation. Mia's mother squeezed her hand gently. Sleep well tonight, she whispered. Tomorrow is another day, full of promise. Mia smiled faintly, her eyes returning to the sky. I will, she said, and she meant it. For Mia, peace was no longer just a word. It was a feeling, a reality, a promise she had fought for and claimed. The clouds continued their lazy drift across the sky. The trees swayed in quiet harmony, and Mia's world, once shattered by fear, was whole again. And as the first stars twinkled into view, she understood this truth, courage, love, and persistence could overcome even the darkest threats. And hope was never out of reach.